set, Aaron. Well, good morning, everybody. Good to have you here. Surprise, surprise. Look up, lights are on, ready to go. It's a Friday morning, 11 o'clock, Colorado Mountain Standard Time, or is it Mountain Daylight Time? I get that mixed up, the MDT or MST. What's the difference? I'm not really sure. But regardless of that, it's still 11 o'clock in the morning here in Colorado for 360 Performance, streaming live at KUHSdenver.com. Having a great time doing that. It's been wonderful. Almost as wonderful is to have a football season, both professional and amateur, where we're going to have fans in the stands. And that's what's important about today. As you can see, for those of you looking over my shoulder, you can see that we are into the season, looking at both the professional and amateur sports. But before we get into too much of that detail, let me make sure that we focus on what I try to do every show, at the beginning of every show, talk about what are you grateful for? Well, one of those things I'm grateful for is that normalcy. And I don't mean to say like everybody's got to have the same definition of what's normal, because I don't want to go down that route. That's a rabbit hole I don't want to jump into. But as it relates to just a day-to-day expectations, I want to be able to expect that I can get up and drive someplace and get a coffee, say hello to someone without having to do it through a screen, a monitor, and talk to them on a Zoom communication. I just want to have those expectations, those senses of legitimate, genuine interactions. I guess I'm calling that normal. So today I'm grateful for that, because our topic also gives me a chance to enrich that normal comment and that conversation when we talk about putting fans in the stands. And yet, as I think about that and putting together today's show, I thought, gosh, will fans in the stands be a distraction or a motivation for our football players, especially at the college level? Because you have different levels of maturity, both physically and mentally. Whereas on the pros, you've recruited, you've spent millions of dollars to get kind of a balance of the talent. So you would think that it doesn't matter whether there's a fan in the stand or not. The pro's going to play. They're going to deliver results. Isn't always the case. I understand that. I'm not that naive. But in the college level, you have different and varying levels of skill, both mentally and physically. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk also about adapting and adjusting to what's going on with regard to bringing fans in the stands, and what is more the burden of the administration, the conferences, the colleges, even the communities that those teams are in. There are some conferences that have taken a more than casual approach, more direct approach, in some cases a fairly demonstrative approach, like the SEC, but the Big Ten, my old conference when I was in college, the ACC and others. I think you've got the Big 12 is also part of this, where they were pretty demonstrative in how they're going to approach the guidelines for fans in the stands. But that being said, I'm not exactly sure why this is happening, but I'm seeing a pattern that in the early games of the football season at the college level, there's more than a common number of conference games. Like the Big Ten is what popped out at me. We had a Minnesota versus Ohio State game this last night. That was an amazing game. I thought they had Ohio State on their heels. But the Big Ten, a great number of the teams have a Big Ten conference opponent as their first game, where typically it's kind of that warmer upper thing. You know, you play someone less physically talented than your team. I'm not saying they're any better or worse, but they definitely on paper don't have the same physicality as your team does, and you use that as a kind of a warmer upper. The other team's incentive is they get paid a lot of money to come to the home field. Back in the day when I was working with CSU, we went to Alabama, got paid a good deal of money to do that. We competed, no question we competed. In fact, the seniors of the class that went down there, many of them went to the NFL. And in fact, some of them are still in the NFL since that time. So we're going to talk about some of those situations that have created a little different look at the start of a football season out of a we're still in a pandemic, but we don't have as many of the restrictions as we had before, where in some cases different conferences like divisions, Division II, Division III, some of them didn't even have a season when we were in the full-blown lockdown of COVID, trying to convince people to get vaccines and wear a mask. So, good morning, everybody. Glad to have you here. That's what we're going to be doing. Hope you can stick with us as we move through the process. And in moving through the process, I try to start every week with a mindset moment. You can find that on our social media feeds for 360 Mindset. That's our website, 360mindset.com. And our mindset moment this week is this phrase. It just seems to fit this week that begins the opening of the NCAA season and is the precursor to the NFL season. This is a bye week. It's week number 4. They agreed in a collective bargaining agreement that there would be 3 preseason weeks and a 4th week that is a bye. But that being said, there's still a lot of anticipation. I think this quote kind of captures some of what needs to be considered during this beginning time of the season. There may be people that have more talent than you, but there's no excuse for anyone to work harder than you do. That is what Derek Jeter had to say back in his day, and I think he still believes it, even as a baseball executive with the Marlins, and a visible talent and influencer, as the term goes in today's social media world. I think many people who know who Derek Jeter is would say he's an influencer, especially in the world of baseball. But the points in his quote are about, it's not about talent alone. It's about effort. In fact, the most talented people physically, when they give an effort to equal or exceed their physical talent, they are almost unstoppable. There's a running back from Minnesota, Abraham, that is, he's a phenomenal talent, and he lets it go. He really explodes. Now, regretfully, he got a little dinged up in the game against Ohio State and was taken out early in the 3rd quarter, never to return. And that may or may not have been a reason for them to lose. I think there were some definite defensive errors that Minnesota committed that I think in looking at the film, they'll get better. I'm sure of that. But that's our quote for today. And I bring that quote up also because understanding that you're talented is one thing, but there's a special mindfulness of that mindset that you need to be aware of to really unlock your energy and commitment to working harder. So you have no excuses and you have no regrets. You gave everything you had, even in a losing effort. You can always look back and say, yeah, I did my job. I really worked hard. I worked hard for me as well as being an example for others. That's what really is exciting for me when we talk about not only this season and having fans in the stands and building that energy around it, but being mindful of that mindset that allows you to manage your emotions during those tough games. If you watched any of the Minnesota-Ohio State game, I think you should have seen just the level of focus. Body language indicated to me the level of mental, cognitive or mental focus that the players had. They all of them look at the sideline for call-ins from their position coaches, and that's different than a lot of college and even pro teams do. It's one person's calling the play. There's really no attention being played to anybody else. Once that play is brought in, the quarterback then delivers it to everybody. The huddles for Minnesota are less about calling out a play, because they already know it. By the time they get to the huddle, they pretty much know what the play they're going to call, but more about the quarterback reminding everybody in that huddle what's expected of them, given a certain situation or a certain look that the defense might give them. I think that's really empowering, that strategy that the Minnesota coach provides them. And that's a strategy about mindfulness, about your mindset, knowing who you are in that moment and bringing you present in that moment, everything that makes you you and the skills that you need to deliver in that moment. Because the bottom line is, working harder is the biggest and most influential equalizer to physical talent that is at or above where you're at. I have seen so many physically limited players excel over others who are more physically talented than themselves. It's been a countless number of examples for me. So that's why I speak very confidently about effort over skill. It's a given for me. It's always there. And as I say that, one of the things that really helps young people who know they're not as physically gifted as others, they need to imagine that reality. They need to see that in themselves, create a vision of what their capabilities are mentally as it connects with their physical skills, so that they can, in that imaginative moment, deliver that intangible. That's where the intangibles come up. And anybody that's listened to me before, you know I talk about the intangibles a lot, because those are championship efforts. Responses, skills delivered in the most appropriate time, but the most unlikely person delivering them, those are intangible moments. Those are the kinds of things that you want to just get so excited about and create a culture and an environment that stimulates the imagination to bring it. Because when you practice things over and over again, your excellence, at whatever degree that excellence is not an act anymore. It's not you talking about it. It's not you posturing yourself in front of somebody. It's a habit, because you deliver. You deliver that. Well, we're going to be doing some delivering. Well, they already have actually this week. With there's been some games already, and the fans, the stands have been packed with fans, which is a wonderful thing. And there's a certain amount of imagination that still needs to be put to bear, a certain amount of practicing that still needs to be delivered, so that the excellence becomes habit and not just an act. With regard to the facilities, this is less about the team and more about the facilities. When we're having this overwhelmingly optimistic view of what the 2021 season will be like for both professional and amateur football. And we'll talk a little bit about who those participants are, what's being pontificated about, who's going to excel, we're questioning whether or not they're going to step up or not. One of the things that interested me is the coach's perspective. Just so you know, Aristotle was where that quote came from. That quote is, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act. It is a habit, if you repeatedly do it. Now, in what we're talking about today, in getting fans in the stands and opening up the seasons for football, the pro level and the college level, there's been a certain amount of tenacious behavior that needed to manifest itself to get to this place. Some were a bit more tenacious than others, as I mentioned earlier in the opening. Conferences like the SEC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, Big 10, ACC, and others were pretty demonstrative in their approach. Well, as I thought through that, I also thought about my experiences with some tenacious individuals. One of those is Weston Richburg. And I'm reaching out to Weston through the show today, so he knows that I am so proud of him and respectful of what he has done as an NFL alum. And for those of you who don't know it, Weston is an NFL alum now. He made a decision to retire back in, I believe it was May or June of this year. And it is the right time. When you know what I know about athletes, I never really say it. It's truly the athlete's choice. But they know, but oftentimes because of their love and passion for their sport and the camaraderie that the teamwork provides them, especially at the pro level, they have a tough time making that decision and literally cutting the cord. It takes a certain amount of tenacity within yourself to get that done. So for those of you who are watching today on the television, the web TV, you'll see the picture of myself and Weston kind of glamming it up for a selfie. Well, actually, it's a groupie because it's two of us, not just me. A groupie at the party that Weston had with Crockett Gilmore down in their hometown in Texas. Once they had committed, Weston had committed to the Giants, Crockett had committed to the Ravens, and they were off and going. They had graduated from college, they were off and running, and this is the picture that he and I took at that beginning. And now that part of his life is an end, but with many great accomplishments. And some are still emerging and still growing, these great accomplishments. He's got a baby boy, he's a dad, he's a property owner and rancher. I'm just, and a loving husband. I'm just so excited for him. So that takes tenacity. So continuing on with what we do, there's a certain amount of adapting and adjusting that the entire programming of getting fans in the stands, just like what Weston has had to face with removing himself from that environment, he's got to adapt and adjust. He's going the other way. Now we're also now trying to recover what we've experienced in the past and adapting and adjusting to new criteria and new guidelines that we're going to be presented with as fans wanting to sit in the stands. So I'm using Weston as a metaphor to talk more about how we need to be really more vigilant about being self-aware, because change is not something that, it happens all the time, right? But most of us as human beings don't want to face change as aggressively as that change may be pronounced to us. So being self-aware helps us to see it coming and gradually adapt and adjust, not taking away from the fact that change can happen very quickly. But if we're aware, if we're self-aware of our environment, the people and the things that are in it, we will have a better chance of minimizing the negative emotions that may come with substantive and quick changes. That's why self-awareness is hugely important. Now, once we get to that point, and I'll come back to Weston again. I saw a picture recently with him, with one of his old teammates who's down in Texas working his career. Weston and his colleague got together and took a picture together. And Weston has lost some weight, so he's doesn't have to be in that football weight again, which is a good thing for his legs and his hips and everything, and ankles and all the injuries that he's had in the past. Both of the guys look great. They were both offensive linemen together at Colorado State University, and now they're self-managing. They're making decisions based on the awareness, based on the conditions of where they're at and what they're doing, and in that adapting and adjusting they've had to do through that awareness, they're now able to manage the situation and continue to move forward in an excellent, self-fulfilling sort of way, so they can determine what they want for themselves. They can be self-aware of that management process, so they can self-determine as best as possible the outcomes. Granted, we have forces that work on us, right? That push and pull, up and down, sideways, all different angles, that may influence what we imagine to be the self-determined path we want to take. But that then repeats the cycle, right? We go back to self-aware because things changed. Even though I was trying to determine one path, maybe some influences, that I might consciously make a different choice. Oh my gosh, new influence, new source of energy, people and things came in. I'll rework my management segment and get a different look at my self-determination. And that brings me back to, we're going to talk in more detail about the fans in the stands and some of the factors that are involved, but there's guidelines that are going to influence our perception of the world we thought was going to be the same as a fan in the stands with football. It's not the same. And it's predicated on, if we're going to be self-determining and trying to manage to that determination, we want to have a perception and a vision of what is success for us. Well, for the athlete, at the athlete perspective, again, continuing with the progression of the thoughts that may have gone through Weston's mind, is the stressors and the fears and the pressure you might have felt in making the decision, in Weston's case, retiring. Oh gosh, I'm letting down my teammates. Oh my gosh, the income level for my family. There's so many things we want to accomplish, and it would be great if I could have just gutted it out a little bit further and gotten paid, gone to the Super Bowl perhaps. San Francisco 49ers is where Weston ended up, and that they had a chance maybe to go to the Super Bowl this year. Well, in that case, you think through the memories, you think through the touchdowns in a key game against a competitor that you wanted to really get some parity with, or those processes of working on your weights and your strength and conditioning that allowed you to not only be self-aware, but the management, when you know how strong you are, and the weight training and the strength and conditioning programs gave you real evidence as to how fast and how far you can go with your endurance. Those are tangibles, and you know that you have a higher level of confidence in your determination, and you can compete at things like scoring a 2-point conversion in the last seconds of a game to tie the game up, and then to go on with that motivation and win the game. That still, to me, is still the most epic game I've either been a part of or seen, with the Colorado State beating Washington State in the New Mexico Bowl back a few years ago. But once again, Weston was part of that routine with us in building that program. And then as you look at it and things progress, and you look at how to be successful, you look at examples of others who are that may be leaders to you, or they may be examples of ways to stay true to it. And that's why football players at the NFL level, they swap jerseys. So there was a moment at a San Francisco 49ers game with the Broncos that Weston Richburg shared his jersey and signed it, as did Shaq Barrett signed his jersey for Weston in that game. And interestingly enough, two of their other teammates from CSU who were not playing, Garrett Grayson were there. Well, the fourth person was not a teammate as much as an alumni of CSU. Anthony Hill was there as well. So there's those images that we can draw on to give us kind of some examples of our expectations. So I'm interested in knowing what the NCAA as a conference was going to do for this season and getting things ready. And what does success look like? And we're with the look, there are some teams that haven't played football at a competitive level. They've trained, but they haven't played football for almost 2 years or more because of COVID. So are there going to be more errors? You haven't exercised your brain through trial and error, like the quote that we started off with Aristotle. Excellence is no longer just something you think about. It becomes a habit because you practice it. We haven't had a chance to practice it. So what's the error factor going to be like in this year's 2021 season? Same question could be asked about the NFL. But for me, it's not so much about error with the NFL, even though if you're not healthy or well enough, you're going to commit an error or a failure on the field. But I will look at health first with the NFL, because many of them, as these are men that are adults, so we think, right, getting paid a great deal of money to perform a great thing, a sport they love. It's like always having, it's always having game time every week, right? It's hard work, but it's still fun, right? So I'm concerned that many of the NFL players in skill positions in particular haven't put in the time in the off season because the pressure wasn't there. There was always this kind of question looming about how much will we be able to do and how much contact will we legitimately be able to have. How will they be segmenting up our practices to allow us to interact with one another and practice so that our excellence is a habit and not just an act? Well, those are all really good questions. And as we think about them, I'm wondering where the coaches are at in trying to keep the players on track. For example, I mentioned the Minnesota-Ohio State game. Well, the coach for Minnesota has been captured, in talks that he may have given, videos that he may have done about his methods and process with his players and coaches. He's definitely got a different style that's not the same as other college coaches, but it seems to work. It seems to connect with the players. What I have found very interesting is it connects in a way that I constantly talk about with teams that I work with, whether it's corporate teams or sports teams, is making sure that all the parts involved in delivering the final outcome are constantly communicated with, and there's clear understanding of how those different individuals, departments, and companies intersect with one another. In the sports world, how does special teams intersect with the offense, intersects with the defense? If you're a fan and you're watching to see what are the indicators of intersections, watch for when the offense comes off the field and the defense goes on, are there handshakes, high fives? Is there recognition of that transition between those two squads? If there is, that's reinforcing behavior. That's the opportunity for coaches to be engaged with the players, to say to them, hey, make sure you share with your teammates. Say something to them that lets them know you noticed what they did, so that they get that positive affirmation, that they have a way to, if they feel down perhaps, but your positive comment that tells them that you saw them gives them a way to cope and prepare for the next outing and overcome any deficiencies they might be feeling. That's a common thing that should happen regardless of fans in the stands or not. But it's difficult to do when you're not allowed to practice that. So coaches tend to need to come into the fray a little bit and share with their players more readily. For example, I'll give you an example of two basketball coaches. One's a men's basketball coach, one's a women's basketball coach. Both happen to be at the same Washington University in St. Louis, which is a Division II school. And it's interesting to note that both of those coaches, they know the rules really well. They're very proficient coaches. And in those rules, they don't have to extend themselves to their players in the off season. But they know, COVID or no COVID, it's important, it's imperative for them to reach out and understand what's the condition of my players, as mentally as well as physically. Are they able to handle? Do they have an extra job they need to have? They know those players well enough to know how they need to manage the situation. And they do it. They go forward and do that. Now, COVID presented a whole different story, because typically, before COVID, it was in person, because many of those players stayed on campus where they could work out. Well, guess what? With COVID, that was taken away from them. They worked out of garages, on the concrete of a coach's house. They worked out on streets, in cul-de-sacs, community centers, and gyms. That was still going on in preparation for this season, because many of them had an attitude of, I don't know what's going to go on. They could take it out from underneath me. Like the basketball coach for the men's team at Washington University, their whole tournament season, they went to the NCAA for the first time in many, many years. These are seniors. That opportunity for being recruited and being seen at a very competitive level was removed, taken away, like it didn't exist. So having the fans in the stands addresses the stressors, the anger, the fear, the pain that many of these athletes have gone through. So it's a cycle we need to be mindful of. So as we think about, I love this picture, in the shadows, bent over, hands clasped, thinking deep in thought. What are we thinking about as far as how we rank ourselves within this whole cadre of events and preparation for the season? Well, we can prepare all we want, but the bottom line still lies with the players who take the field and present themselves. So let's take a look at the players. Like, for example, the top 25 teams in the college ranks. I'm going to let you look at the top 10. Are they ready And then we're going to look at the NFL power rankings to see about who's on top of that list as well. So let's start with the top 25. Look, can you guess? For those of you who aren't already guessing, not only is it the number one team in this season's top 25, I'm only going to give you the top 10, but it's also the first letter in the alphabet. It's Alabama, not Arkansas. It's Alabama. And then you're not going to be surprised as to who the top 5 are. Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Georgia. Now, Georgia and Clemson, they played this weekend. That is a huge game. That's the first game of the season. That's awesome. I love that. Why wait? Why play these games of warming the team up? If you've got a program like the Clemson and Georgia teams have, like the Alabamas have, like the Ohio States have, where there's huge equipment expenditures, all kinds of great food and nutrition. You've got people talking to the kids about, their mental capacity and how they can handle being self-aware, self-managed, and self-determined. It should work, right? The excellence should not be an act. It should be a habit. Well, guess what? Ohio State, with all those resources, when they were playing Minnesota in the first half, it looked like it was an act. Now, fortunately, they must have had enough practice that light bulb clicked in after halftime. They came out and they executed. Now, regretfully, Minnesota didn't perform as well as they could have in the second half. A couple of key errors that resulted in touchdowns and a 14-point addition for Ohio State didn't help Minnesota's situation. But my point is that are these teams ready? Have they put the time in, or are they going to be like what Ohio State represented? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Well, we'll see who shows up on that given day. Now, just to round out the top 10, so I stay true to all 10 of them. Number 6 is Texas A&M, Notre Dame. Iowa State is number 8. North Carolina and Cincinnati. I really believe in the Iowa State head coach. He's a lot like, his attitude and his methods are a lot like the Minnesota coach. They're two different people. Their approaches are different and unique, but he connects with his kids. He really knows how to make a difference with them as human beings and not just as football players. I find that just outstanding. So when we take a look at that, who are the players to watch? Now, I mentioned in my opening that Abraham from Minnesota. Now, he got an injury in the second half, took him out for the remainder of the game. Who knows whether that would have been, if he got a chance to stay in and felt good about it, that he would have had an influence on the game that would have changed the outcome. I don't know. But it's regretful that he was not in the rest of the game. He is, in fact, a player to watch. Now, as I say that, I'm going to focus in on 3 games and the players in these 3 college games. And by no means are they nationally recognized games to watch. And why they are for me, because UNC versus CU, that's a state thing. They play at 7 p.m. tonight. Understand, UNC has not played a competitive game for 650 days. 2 years. 2 years. How fresh are they going to be? Now, that being said, CU has a whole bunch of transfers, and many of those transfers were in their defensive secondary. UNC has the McCaffrey connection. There are 3 McCaffreys on the UNC, either coaching or player roster. 2 are on the coaching roster, Max and Dad, Ed, and then little brother, who was picked back from the Michigan Wolverines and Harbaugh to be quarterback for UNC. Now, they have some pretty good receivers against that secondary for CU. The pontificators say the spread is over 30 points. It's a 48-6 prediction, CU win. If CU comes into the stadium with any kind of attitude at all about, we got this, who are they, what is this, that could be a recipe for failure. Not necessarily a recipe for loss, but failure during the game, which could make it a very interesting game to watch. So I would encourage you, not so much a player to watch, well, one player to watch. Watch the McCaffrey kid. He's a pretty stout quarterback, 4-star quarterback that got recruited and went to Michigan, and is now at UNC with his dad and his big brother, Max. And Max is probably going to have a few things to say to his little brother because Max was a receiver, did pretty well. Not nearly as well as the other older brother with the Panthers. But we'll wait and see how he does, and we'll talk a little bit about the NFL in just a second. But Mr. McCaffrey with the Panthers is not somebody that is a player to watch. I like watching him, talented young man, but not getting a lot of the visual accolades about what he's done as of yet, because they expect it. He is a known commodity. He should deliver. Now, here's the other game. It's my alma mater. I got my PhD from CSU. So the Rams are going against the Jackrabbits, San Diego State. Interesting game. I'm hoping 7 p.m. on Fox, FS1 tonight. The San Diego State Jackrabbits, they are a ranked team in Division II, and they competed very aggressively into the finals of last year's season with that conference. So this is not a pushover team. It is a game that the Rammies are going to be challenged with, and if their quarterback and their wide receivers can really run their routes crisply, be deliberate and functional in delivering blocks for their running game, they'll have a good 1-2 punch. But it's going to be a 4-quarter game, and the team that's going to win is going to hit all 3 components of the roster. It's special teams, offense, defense, all have to do their job for CSU to come out with the win. San Diego State is a little bit like, from the standpoint of historical performance, a lot like Ohio State. Got some talent, proven they can deliver with that talent, but whether or not they do deliver is still an open question. So the maturity, emotional maturity, is going to be a big component as to whether San Diego State has a chance of winning that game. So my prediction, here's my prediction. I believe Colorado State is going to win that game. And it's going to be a short margin. I don't think it's going to be more than a touchdown, but I'll say within a 3-point spread, Colorado State will win that game. Now, noon tomorrow, well, not really noon. It'll be a little afternoon because the television backs and forth. It's on the Big Ten Network as well as on Fox Sports. Nationally ranked Indiana is going to play the Hawkeyes, who are also nationally ranked. They're 18th. Almost every poll vote, whether it's AP, coaches, or what have you, had Iowa at 18. Pretty consistent, right? But a little bit of vacillation on Indiana. But they play, and that's going to be a good game. It's going to be a high-scoring game, and it's, once again, for the margin to be small for the win, and it not being a blowout, will be based on which of the 2 teams can actively and aggressively counter all 3 components of the game. Who can control the line of scrimmage, who can dominate the line of scrimmage defensively, and who can really put the other team back on their heels in the special teams game. Every possession needs to be a confidence builder towards a score, which if that attitude is held at all, both teams will score prolifically, and it will be a high-scoring close game, not a low-scoring close game. But you can guess that I'm an Iowa Hawkeye fan. My undergraduate's from Iowa. I played basketball at Iowa, so that's where I'm at. And I'm just curious. I want to see the quarterback Petrus come out aggressively with some very definitive behavior against the IU defense. The IU defense has some gaps that Petrus, if he's got his eyes. He's getting his checks quick. Last season, he was not all that quick at picking up his reads. And let me also say, he's really good at seeing his reads. He's just slow at it. And he can adapt and adjust, which he did throughout the season last year. I hope he's at that same level this year. Interestingly enough, it's a one-step separation in rankings between Indiana and Iowa. Indiana is 17, and Iowa's 18. Flip a coin. I think it's going to be a great game, a really great game. I'm looking forward to it. So less players to watch on the college ranks, but on the pro ranks, here's the list. And as I put this first one up, Mahomes, absolutely. Kansas City's biggest problem is knowing how to protect Holmes, and then the second biggest problem is giving him the opportunities to just do what he does. Andy Reid is a great coach for him and a father figure on the field to get Mahomes just rocking. And I think it's going to start off this weekend, or next weekend. The other one is Brady. You see a theme here? Look, I've got to pat Brady on the figurative backside because he has delivered what he said he's going to deliver as a 40-plus-year-old. It doesn't matter what other people say about their opinion about him still playing the game. If the man delivers at the level of excellence that he does in comparison to others that are half his age, you go with it, because you get with him what you don't get with players, quarterbacks half his age: the insight, the experience, the calmness, the sideline demeanor, the locker room presence. And I have to say that about Mahomes as well. But Brady is in a class by himself when it comes to knowing the game and truly executing what he says. That's just been part of who he is from the time he was in college. He's a battler. The other one is more group than a single. We could say the quarterback for the Browns because he's a big leader on that team, but it's the Browns team. And when I say team, I mean everybody across the sideline as well as on the sidelines. Their entire organization has made a huge change. And I think you're going to see the Browns, if they have done what I would hope every pro team has done, well, college for that matter as well, is train physically. Strength and conditioning, off-season, was diligent. They worked hard. I know one player on that team, Rashard Higgins, Hollywood. He is absolutely one of those people. And yet, he is a gem that they don't polish enough. And he could be a hero there. So that's one, along with their quarterback, that could be not only the team to watch, but players to watch within that team. So, fans in the stands, getting there. Want to bring you to the stands, get you in the stands. How are you going to enter the domicile of football? What are they going to ask you to do when you walk in? Will you be a placard? Will you be a cardboard cutout? Or will you be you in the stands? Well, more of you will be you in the stands. We know that from what's been reported. Now, will there be seats between you, behind you, in front of you that are not occupied? For some stadiums, that is the case. But it begs the question about mask or no mask. When you get there and you're not the placard, you're not the cutout, what are you going to have to prepare? What are you going to have to wear? Well, in some stands, in some cities, some campuses, it's a mandate. Campuses can do that. It's private property. It's their property. They can make it part of your admission to have to make you wear a mask. And look, as a fan, you can bitch and moan and whine all you want, but that's their property. They're allowing you for a fee to go into that facility, but behave as they want you to behave for the safety of everyone around you in honoring the game, the entertainment that you're going to see. You need to respect it and do what they say. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to know what it is. I just want a clear statement. Now, the other part is, do I need to take my card with me? Not my credit card. My vaccination confirmation card or not? And interestingly enough, some stadiums are doing that. They're part of the ticket sales. The message when you bought your ticket was, you better have proof of vaccination when you come to pick up your tickets. And if we give you your tickets, that will be the indication that you've been approved. Now, my question is, how do you know the person with the ticket that comes in was the one who bought the tickets? A whole other set of circumstances, right? But we're thinking it through. We're practicing what we need to practice to get this done. And I like that, so that we can get legitimate, safe fans in the stands to do what we want to have done, so that we can address what those differences are compared to what we used to do. Look, anybody that's my age and they remember college, I had a leather bag with a top on it that was my skin for my liquor that I carried around my neck. Back in the day when they wouldn't let you in with that, I would put it under my coat. But back then they didn't search anybody. They didn't ask you to open up your coat. They look at you, they go, okay, you got a ticket, good, you're in. And I would have, I had people that I knew that would have anywhere from 1 to 6 wine bags around their body and their coat over the top of it. And then they would disperse it to the people in the stands that sat with them. That's not the same as it is today. So what are the differences? What do I have to prepare for? Well, if it's an empty stands, I don't have to prepare for anything because I'm not going to be let in. Their guidelines are too tight. But I hope that when I'm let in and I'm not a placard, I'll be able to see these young ball players run onto the field with all the pomp and circumstance, the smoke machines, the fireworks, whatever it is that you use at your stadium. I just remember back when we went to Alabama for the first time at CSU, they've got 4 huge jumbotrons, one in each corner of the stadium, that are playing from the minute that stadium opens. They're reeling film and testimonials and music to intimidate the living daylights out of the opposing team who's warming up on their stadium. Well, we haven't had that for 2 years. It's coming back. The pomp, the circumstance, the smoke machines, the fireworks, the jumbotrons, and yet there are some where there will be spacing. If you have a seat marked out for you, that's where your ticket will be, and the space in between you will comply with social distancing. But ultimately, we want to be able to have it as this: running on the field, celebrating your institution, celebrating the state that you play in, with the fans packed in the stands. As it was for the Ohio State Minnesota game, there were 42,000 plus fans in the stands in Minnesota. Now, that being said, and that being the end goal, what does it take to get us there? Well, conferences have their viewpoint. Prove vaccine. The state has their viewpoint. They may mandate masks. Or they may say, you've got to prove as a stadium before you even start selling tickets what you're going to do. And in some cases, at the college level with the private property, they're asking for both. Prove that you've got a vaccine and wear a mask, and then you could come in and celebrate the team, your child perhaps, your alma mater perhaps, or all of the above, if you're a legacy family. It's an interesting world we're in right now. It's really exciting for me. So, coming back to the power rankings with NFL, we talked about the NCAA, we talked about the guidelines and getting fans in the stands. At the pro level, they've had limited access to now being able to have perhaps full access of fans in the stands. They are going to have similar guidelines and requirements that colleges will. Not regretfully, but different than colleges, the stadiums aren't always private property. They could be actually owned by a city, or owned by the franchise themselves, or owned by an entirely separate private enterprise. So the rules may be applied to them in different levels of degree. So you may go into a pro stadium and not have to wear a mask. That will be your choice, because that's what they said they wanted to do. And they would be fully within their rights, more than likely because of their state, the federal government, or both. But that being said, here's 3 teams that should be getting notoriety in their power rankings. And there is some prescribed outcomes that people expect of them, like Tom Brady, the Buccaneers. go for another Super Bowl. They have a majority of their team returning. Not a lot of guessing as to what I need to do and how I need to do it when I've got a teammate I've been with for the last 3 years. Pretty good stuff. Just ask Shaq Barrett and how great his career has been since the 49ers. Or Tom Brady and his resurrection. And that's being kind of tongue-in-cheek. There was no resurrection for Tom Brady. It is what it is. But then there's Mahomes and Kansas City and Andy Reid and the whole group there. Those are power teams right there. They're going to be in the hunt. But so is Cleveland. Their organization, all of their parts of their organization have been greatly improved. Now, Buccaneers number 1, Kansas City number 2 in the power rankings, Cleveland number 5. But I believe Cleveland, when they make a statement early, they will move up in those power rankings and overcome Green Bay at number 4 and the Buffalo Bills at number 3. Because both of those teams have more than their fair share of internal strife, as was evidenced by Mr. Aaron Rodgers and his delays coming into the team and playing the contract negotiating game. So, I don't have any prescribed outcomes as to who's going to end up in the Super Bowl. Heck, it could be a Tampa Bay, Kansas City deal again. But Cleveland will be in the mix, as will our Denver Broncos. Oh my gosh, it's the bottom line though is football, whether it's if it's the NFL or it's the NCAA, it's entertain the fans. Put butts in seats, fans in the stands, give them an opportunity to show what they need to show and celebrate it. I love this picture. Fireworks over the river in Nashville with the Nissan Stadium scoreboard shining in the background at Titan Stadium, and the Korean Veterans Bridge in red, white, and blue as they celebrated the Music City Grand Prix this last August. Entertain the fans. Give them communication about the changes so they know what you expect of them. But it's clear and easy instructions. You want that because you want their ticket funds. You want them buying merchandise and food. But if you don't have that clarity and it's not easy to participate, you're not going to get that. They're going to say, what the hell, I'll watch it at home. I'll go to my refrigerator and get a beer. You know, make my own popcorn, my own stove. I don't care about talking to my buddy next to me that stands. I love it, but I can do without it. Because you didn't make it very easy for me. But if you have preparation and plans, you're going to perform. Now, the 3 Ps are just the same thing I tell college ball players, pro ball players, and their teams and their coaches. Same thing goes for the administration. You're part of the team. Prepare, plan, and deliver your performance. Remember, excellence is not an act. It's a habit if you practice. If you work it through, get a vision, have some imagination, think about it. Consistently, you'll deliver that entertainment that the fans expect. Fans in the stands, people. Streaming right here at KUHS Denver every Friday, 11 o'clock. Mountain Standard or Mountain Daylight? Which one is it? Oh, that's Mountain Time. Every Friday, 11 o'clock. 360 Performance coming at you. If you check us out, you can hear the rebroadcast of our podcast on Spotify. We just got on Amazon, so look up 360 Performance on those podcast platforms, and you'll find us there. This show will be posted shortly because it comes from 360 Performance. I'm Coach Whiteman, here every Friday. Glad to be with you here. I had a great time. It was fans in the stands goal, our theme was, but also it's about performing, delivering. In this case, the delivery is entertainment. Come on, teams, deliver. Deliver the entertainment. Be there for them. Have a great day today. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the football. Maybe you're a fan in the stand. Have a great day, everybody. Love being with you. Thanks a lot. Take care.